and aimed at the suspect.
Suddenly, an officer races towards the sergeant and pulls him by the belt with both hands away from the car. Sergeant Police, pepper spray still in one hand, grabs the officer with the other and pushes her against a patrol car.
The initial contact between the sergeant and the officer was his hand against her throat.
Watch again from both camera angles. It's quick, but the sergeant's hand is at her neck before moving to her shoulder.
Hey guys, Mike the Cop. Well. I posted a short clip, which kudos to Police Posts, they're always on top of this stuff. Police Posts on Instagram. I was chatting back and forth with Adam from there, and he showed me this clip. It's on their account as well. And I was like, what in the cop on cop is happening here? I posted the reel just to put it out there, because usually when I do that, people will respond back, and I'll be able to find the details that way. And I did. This is out of Sunrise PD. I'm going to show you the news piece and then come back at the end with my thoughts if you care to have them.
Sunrise Police released this body camera video to 7 Investigates after a tip led us to ask about a November 19th incident. Citing an ongoing internal affairs investigation, the department turned off the sound and obscured almost all the faces, except for one, Sergeant Christopher Police.
When he went up and put his hand on her throat, what was your reaction?
I find this behavior to be disgusting. I think the video speaks for itself.
Just a minute earlier, the body cam shows a man being walked by officers to a patrol car. He was being arrested for aggravated battery after police say he hit people outside this convenience store. The man under arrest is already in handcuffs, but officers appear to be having difficulty getting him into the car. Around that time, Sergeant Police pulls up and walks up to the suspect. Sunrise Police Chief Anthony Rosa says he could not tell us what the sergeant said, but says it made the situation worse.
I find it to be inappropriate and unprofessional, because what he did is he escalated the situation when calm was actually required.
You see the cuffed man back away in the back seat as Sergeant Police leans into the car.
And we saw that he had pepper spray in his hand. Was he threatening to use that on the cuffed suspect?
So the pepper spray was out and aimed at the suspect.
Suddenly, an officer races towards the sergeant and pulls him by the belt with both hands away from the car. Sergeant Police, pepper spray still in one hand, grabs the officer with the other and pushes her against a patrol car.
The initial contact between the sergeant and the officer was his hand against her throat.
Watch again from both camera angles. It's quick, but the sergeant's hand is at her neck before moving to her shoulder. Seconds later, he walks back to the car with the cuffed suspect, opens the door and closes it before pointing at the officer and saying something. Chief Rosa says the young officer did the right thing.
So I'm very proud of this police officer. She took some definitive action. I can only imagine what she must be feeling. She's a newer officer and he's a very senior sergeant.
Just how new? The 28-year-old officer, who we are not naming, has been with Sunrise Police for just over 2.5 years. Compare that to 46-year-old Sergeant Christopher Police, a 21-year-plus veteran of the force.
If one of us had ever grabbed an officer by the throat, we would be arrested, we would be put in jail. Why is that not happening with him?
So there's some details of the investigation that I've not disclosed that I'm unable to disclose right now. And if any of the information that comes up during the investigation rises to a level of criminal behavior or criminal conduct, then we'll address it appropriately.
There is a new state law requiring departments train officers on their duty to intervene if they see another officer using excessive force. Chief Rosa says Sunrise already has policies requiring intervening and de-escalation.
This officer intervening and stopping a situation from getting any worse is a direct reflection of the training that we do with the police department. And I think that it's important to note that the behavior is very unacceptable by the sergeant, but the behavior of the officer that intervened is exactly what society is asking their police officers to do right now.
And while the department does realize the public is going to want to see and hear all of the video for themselves, the chief offers this.
I'm not releasing the audio at this moment in time. However, once the investigation is done, I am committed to being completely open and transparent, and everything will be released.
All right, we're still at a little bit of a disadvantage here because we don't have the full audio to get a fully objective understanding of what took place. I will say this, that I have absolutely pepper sprayed a handcuffed subject in the back of a police car because they were continuing to fight, continuing to resist. They still can present a danger even in handcuffs. Or they were also trying to kick out the windows in the police car. There's all sorts of things. And we also have these splices of body cam footage on here, not necessarily the full picture and the full story. So I want to be, put it all out on Front Street there, that I'm trying to give my objective opinion about this based on what we know and what has been released, not what will ultimately shake out in the end. There's no legal issue with pepper spraying someone who is resisting, even if they're in handcuffs. It may be a policy issue, okay? If the department has a policy against that and he went against that, then that would be something that they have to deal with. And the person giving the interview from the department does seem to indicate that they're at least asserting that he was going against how they would expect by policy for them to de-escalate. Also worth noting that if there is a past practice of that particular use of force for that level of resistance, whatever was going on, and this leadership is now going to choose, because this came into the public eye, now going to choose to enforce a policy that's on paper but has never been practically enforced, the department could be putting itself in a difficult position as well, because the sergeant with all that experience in a leadership position may be doing what he has practiced and been trained to do, even though it might not be in the bounds of written policy, but practically has been permitted, which means practically it's allowed. But me not knowing the policies of Sunrise, that's just all speculation. So I don't want to speculate. Let's talk about objectively when it comes to what was legally going on. Where that subject's resistance will indicate legally in the state of Florida what uses of force are permitted at that time, okay? So the question will be, Florida law enforcement officers weigh in here, is pepper spraying a resisting subject in the back of a car who is handcuffed allowed by your use of force matrix? That is a very valid legal question to determine, is what he doing beyond the bounds of the law? Is he abusing his authority under color of law in that case by doing that? I am not familiar with Florida use of force matrix, only Michigan's. So I will let you guys sort of weigh in on that. But that's important to understand in terms of his culpability, okay? So don't just throw him under the bus only for that reason, because we need to make sure that we're actually criticizing him on a legal leg to stand on, okay? So there's that. If he was doing things in the bounds of the law and the other officer pulled him out of that and interfered with that, well, then she's kind of got a problem. That's not necessarily the right way to handle that. Okay, she might not like his aggressive posture. She might not like what's happening, but if he's within the bounds of the law and in the practical bounds of policy, then grabbing him physically and pulling him off might not have been the wisest thing to do, okay? Especially if he ultimately ends up being in the right. Now, if he was going outside of those bounds and she did that, well, then she's right for attempting to do the right thing. Now, one could question whether physically grabbing him and pulling him unexpectedly in the middle of a tense situation was wise, but she's doing what comes to mind. Obviously, she does something, which is good. And then, of course, his reaction. I'm not sure that there's a circumstance that putting his hands on her throat and pushing her back and then taking his attention away from what he thought was a big problem before, now onto her, was a wise course of action either. So lots of interesting mess going on. My take is, as far as I'm concerned, that it appears to be that the sergeant was escalating the situation when it didn't need to be, and the rookie handled it the way she thought she should handle it, what also just escalated the situation further. I don't know. What a mess. What do you guys think? Drop your thoughts in the comments, especially those of you with experience with Florida law enforcement. I would love to hear your take on this. If anybody has further insight, feel free to message me, Mike at MikeTheCop.tv. Peace.